All right. Wow. It is great to see you all here today. Oh, and by the way, what Shannon said was not just like a poll of the Timberlake staff. We heard from a bunch of people out on the street. They were like, "This is our favorite booth in the whole Duval Day celebration." So that was a huge win. Super fun. I mean, we just gave away snow cones and like toys and stuff. So how can you go wrong with that? But what an amazing opportunity to just like have us be able to come together and show God's generosity and love towards this town. So thank you all for making it happen, especially those of you who give financially and those of you who gave your time to make that come together. We really appreciate you. All right, well, as we get started today, I do think you need to know this about me. I love a good story. I love great, grand, epic stories. I also love just like heartwarming stories with predictable endings, as long as the ending's good. If it's a sad ending, I'm out. But everything else, I love good stories. And our culture is full of good stories. We have great movies, like just amazing books and fictional stories, historical fiction, anybody? Yeah, that's just so many good stories for us to pull from. And I think our culture has kind of aligned around a few, maybe several, but a few key stories that I think we can all enjoy together. Amazing endings like the one to this movie. Wizard of Oz, as Dorothy wakes up surrounded by her family and perhaps it was all a dream. An amazing ending to an amazing classic story. Or moving a little bit more into my generation, we love it. We love it when Harry Potter defeats Voldemort and then sends his own kids off to Hogwarts. Or when Tony Stark, and this is my favorite movie, I'm just going to tell you right now, saves the world by sacrificing himself and chooses to end his story with the famous words, "I am Iron Man." Oh, chills. Yeah, I can't do it like he can, but still, Robert Downey Jr. Gets the crown for that one. And we love it when we get to the end of 3 hours of atrocious acting and forced dialogue, and the ship finally goes down, and we could say goodbye to Leonardo. What a good ending to a good story. I got one cheer. That's good. Okay. I'm glad I'm not alone over here. But whether it's like Disney or Marvel or these like big epic dramas, we love good stories with good endings. And why? Why do we love them? Because not only does a good movie or a good story connect with our mind, but it connects with our heart as well. And we're in this series called Reading Between the Lines, where we have just been going through the parables of Jesus with the goal of understanding what is it that Jesus is really trying to communicate. Now, if you don't know what a parable is, it's pretty simple, although it's not a word that we like use anywhere else other than in the words of Jesus, but it's pretty simple. A parable is simply a made-up story with a very real truth that it is illustrating. A made-up story illustrating a very real truth, Now, as we go through the parables of Jesus, the truth is that the deeper understanding, the more, maybe the next level of understanding what Jesus is trying to say isn't always obvious. There are parables that are confusing and hard to understand and hard to apply to our lives. And that is why Jesus says this: anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. Obviously, he's not talking about physical ears. All of his crowds in everywhere he went, I'm going to just assume they all had physical ears, at least one of them. But he's talking about spiritual ears, spiritual understanding, a heart and ears that are open to understand something that's maybe a little bit deeper, something that doesn't just connect with our heads, but connects with our hearts. So today, that's what I want to do. I want us to just slow down, step back, breathe, and understand what is the real message behind Jesus' parables. Because I think if we do that, it will begin to expose the things that are hidden in our hearts, even today, 2,000 years later. And before we get really into it, we need to understand the purpose of Jesus' parables. Because the purpose of Jesus' parables is not to manage our behavior but to transform our hearts. And as we're going to see in the story in just a second, if our hearts are not changed, we just try to modify our behavior, one of two things is going to happen. We're either going to get frustrated and resentful and unhappy, or we're going to slip back into whatever that old behavior was, and it's going to be like kind of a nice New Year's resolution of going to the gym for like 3 weeks before you gave it up, and we're just going to go back to the way that we lived before. But the parables touch our heads and our hearts with the goal of not just transforming the way we act, but transforming the people that we are. And if our hearts are changed, our behavior will follow. So, in the story that we're looking at today, I want to give you a little bit of context. Jesus is standing in front of a crowd, as he does a lot of the time when he's teaching. This is about 2,000 years ago, and we have a doctor named Luke who actually decided that he was going to put together the most orderly and complete account of Jesus' works and Jesus' life that he could. And so he did that by reading eyewitness testimony and interviewing people who were first-hand witnesses to what Jesus said and did. And when he put together his book, which now sometimes we just call Luke, he writes this about Jesus. At the beginning of this parable. He says, tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. And when this happens, I think anybody who's reading Luke in the first century understands what Luke is trying to communicate. These aren't really categories that you and I probably use, maybe tax collectors, I guess, but and other notorious sinners. I'm sure somebody has strong opinions on that in the crowd, but I'm not going to ask any questions there. But we often don't use these terms today to mean the same things that Jesus meant 2,000 years ago. But very simply, it meant that Jesus attracted people who were nothing like him, but really liked him. All sorts of people who, whereas Jesus was this teacher who was probably fairly well put together, at least in comparison to many of the people who surrounded him, he was often surrounded by rough people, messy people, people who are a lot like some of the people that we know, and sometimes like people who come into Timberlake Church. People who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." You know, this group of sinners, as they use the term in Luke, really talks about a group of people who the way they lived ostracized them from society, especially the part of society that the powerful and the influential Pharisees and teachers of the law ran. They put down laws as you would expect, and when people lived outside of those laws, or really God's law that had been passed down and then expanded on through the Torah and the Mishnah, they put people who ignored those laws and those rules outside of this category of people that we can all spend time with, that, you know, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law are comfortable being around. And they said, these people really are people that no good Jewish rabbi means teacher, Jesus was a teacher, no good Jewish teacher would spend time with. And so they're frustrated and they're grumbling, and this becomes the context by which, or in which, Jesus begins his 3 stories that he's going to use as he replies to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. And those stories are the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. And in every one of these stories, they're going to follow the same rhythm. Something is lost, then that thing is found, and then there is a celebration as it comes back where it probably should have been, or definitely in this case should have been all along. So we're going to spend today diving into the 3rd story, the story of the lost son, which begins like this. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now, before you die." Now, I think many of us can be very removed from this story. It was 2,000 years ago, different culture, ancient Jewish world, which was just a subset of the Roman Empire, very different than America today. But the shock of this should not be lost on us. The shock of this, which is essentially this younger son coming to his father and saying, I just wish that you were dead or that you weren't around and I could have your stuff or the stuff that one day I'm supposed to get when you pass away and then go and use it so that I can actually be happy. If I have your things and I leave, I'll be happier than being around you. Like the most disrespectful thing that the son in this story could have possibly said. He's not saying, hey, Dad, I want to withdraw some money. He's saying, Dad, I do not want you. I do not want the family. I would be happier without you. This is just purely offensive. So you would expect the father to react strongly. But here's what Jesus says. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. Now, if you, especially if you're a dad, but really anybody in here, if your reaction to this is, why, I would never do that, yeah, mine too. Like, I'm not going to give Knox, my 6-year-old, like a third of the money right now just because he says, I don't want to be around you anymore. And in the ancient Middle East, this would not have been something that was ever considered. This was so disrespectful. You don't get to talk to your dad like this, really the patriarch in that culture of your family, and then get to, like, just have whatever you asked for and go and live your life. But in this story, the father does respond in a way that would have been shocking to Jesus' original listeners and should be surprising to us too. And here's why. Just to give you a little bit of a peek into the future of where Jesus is going with this story, Jesus is going to tie this figure of the Father to God himself. And I think he reveals something about God early in this story that some of us know and Jesus wants us to see early on. God really often does allow us to forge our own path, to make our own decisions, whether they're going to hurt us or help us. And that is exactly what the father does here. And so here's what happens next. A few days later, this younger son packed up all of his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all of his money on wild living. So we sit back, we can picture this right now. He's in Vegas. Bottle service at Caesars, penthouse at the Bellagio, front row seats to Cirque du Soleil. He's all a baller, but without a budget. And he's out here just living large, having a great time until about the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him to his field to feed the pigs. So the young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. And so we have this picture of this guy. He's out on the streets in Vegas, nothing but his phone, which is on 2%. He walks out of a room that he doesn't recognize, his pocket or bag full of receipts that he has no memory of purchasing at all of these places. And he's feeling it. He can't find a job. He's feeling the impact of tariffs and inflation. His friends are gone. And he discovers something that many of us have or will discover in life. What looks like freedom often ends up becoming a prison. For so many of us, especially those of you who are like me and spent a lot of time, maybe grew up in church, the weight and pressure and expectations of religiosity can feel like such a prison that anything outside of it looks like freedom. And that is really exactly what this young man experienced. He never planned any of this. He's at his low point, rock bottom. Man, I wonder how many of us have felt like we're at rock bottom. And Jesus says that he ends up feeding pigs. Why feeding pigs? This was the picture of a wealthy inheritor, maybe a kind of lord, you might imagine, in ancient Jewish culture, who has fallen from this high, probably exactly what you wanted to be and hoped that you were born into, down to the lowest of the low. Pigs were not animals that Jewish men were allowed to be around, to touch, to interact with, certainly not to feed. And yet, he sees them eating their pods, and he is hungry. Now, what sort of pods are these? Here's a picture of carob pods. Carob pods it's a pod, a real pod from a real tree that grows in the Middle East, and a very common food for things like pigs, different animals. But humans should not eat them. Now, you can eat them. They're technically edible. You could consume it. You're not going to die. But it's the sort of food that as a human you only eat if it is your only choice. And so he's at this spot where this is the worst possible job. It is functionally cut him off from society because he can't be around other Jewish people after interacting with these pigs. And he's wanting to eat the worst food imaginable. He's lost, alone, his friends are gone, he has fallen about as far as a person can fall. And you can just imagine the teachers of the law over here who have been listening to these three stories, which were told in response to them grumbling, and they're nodding. Yeah, he got what he deserved. He put himself in that place. That is, he's reaping the rewards of his own actions. This story is going the way, all of them should hear this, these Jewish teachers are saying as they look out at this crowd of all sorts of people, including tax collectors and sinners. Yeah, listen to how far he fell. Now, today, I don't think you and I probably are ever tempted to go eat carob pods. If you're anything like me, you had no idea what carob pods were until you started studying a story like this or hearing a talk about a story like this. But I do think that all of us have things in our life that we tend to turn towards, to run to, when we feel desperate, helpless, and alone. We don't necessarily eat real modern-day carob pods, but I think most of us have felt the temptation, maybe made the decision, to chase something we would have otherwise avoided. You get into college, and all of a sudden, life's very confusing. Maybe you're living at home, maybe you're living at a new dorm, you're surrounded by people, you are kind of on the back foot, you don't know people, you start making decisions in order to fit in. Or you're at your job and the pressure just comes on and it's hard and it's heavy and it weighs on you, and you connect into an unhealthy relationship that you would have always known better than, that it wasn't going to be for your joy or for your good or for your hope or for anything that was going to add anything to your life, but in the midst of the pressure and the stress, you don't really know what else to do, so you make a decision. All of us are tempted to find ways of finding relief when we feel the financial pressure or the health diagnosis or whatever that makes us feel out of control and lost and alone. We distract ourselves, maybe scrolling endlessly or scrolling on things that we really shouldn't have ever been looking at, or looking for a sense of control in substances or even addictions and addictive behaviors that we knew that we didn't even want. There are a lot of examples of modern-day carob pods that all of us are tempted towards when we feel lost, helpless, and alone. So then we read this. When he finally came to his senses, that's an interesting thought. How many of us have felt like in the midst of whatever decisions we were making or addictions or relationships, we suddenly realized we did not like where we were at. We did not want to be here. So he continues, when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I'll go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he returned home to his father. And so here he is at his lowest point. He writes a speech just to get a job, maybe not even a job to make money, just a job where he could have food and not starve. He's preparing for rejection. He is prepared that maybe the locks have changed. He's preparing for a lecture. Maybe those are the best case scenarios. And I wonder how many of us have made decisions or made habits or made rhythms in our life that we feel like we don't know. If we turned to God, how would he ever respond? If we showed up at church and told somebody what really happened yesterday, what really happened last week, what really happened last year, people are going to reject me. God is going to reject me. God doesn't want a bunch of messy people like me here in his church. How often do we feel that temptation? He burned half the family fortune. And so here's what happens. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming, filled with love and compassion. He ran to his son and embraced him. Man, the father was waiting. He was anticipating the moment that his son would come back. And I want you to hear that if you're here today and you feel like you're afraid of rejection, you feel like you're too far off, you feel like your life is just too out of alignment, God is waiting for you. God wants to connect with you. He wants you to experience not correction, but close personal presence that'll change your heart and then change the behavior as well. God is waiting for you. God runs, the father in the story runs as fast as he can to close the distance between he and his son the moment he sees his son turn towards him. And so here we are in the story, and we've got basically the first Middle Eastern Hallmark movie. It's a beautiful ending. The son is stunned, and so he jumps into his rehearsed speech, and he says this. His son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son." But the father interrupts him. He says, No. Quick, you guys, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Why a robe and a ring? Well, these are the things that signify him. A robe is what the manager, the master, the leader of the house wears. And a ring is it's a signet ring for the family. And he says, come, bring these things. My son is here. The father can't even contain himself. Brings the family crest ring, the robe, to show that he's in charge. And then he continues with even more instructions. Kill the calf that we've been fattening, the best food that we can possibly provide. We got to celebrate with a feast for my son. This son of mine was dead, and now he's returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found. And so the party began. And this is this glorious, beautiful picture of grace. Grace is this funny thing that I think most of us say or hear, but it's hard to really know what it means. And this quote from the lead singer of U2, Bono, actually I think captures so much of the contrast between grace and religiosity. Bono says this, "You see, at the center of all religions is the idea of karma. You know, what you put out comes back to you, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Or in physics, every action is met by a equal and opposite one. It's clear to me that karma is at the very heart of the universe. And yet, along comes this idea called grace, to upend all that as you reap, so you will sow stuff. Grace defies reason and logic. Love interrupts the consequences of your actions, which in my case is very good news indeed, because I've done a lot of stupid stuff. That's between me and God, but I would be in big trouble if karma was going to finally be my judge. It doesn't excuse my mistakes, but I'm holding out for grace. I'm holding out that Jesus took my sins onto the cross because I know who I am. Oof. And I hope I don't have to depend on my own religiosity." And what a great end to the story, right? Happily ever after, the end, the younger son is home, everyone's happy. And for a long time, growing up hearing this story, I thought this was the end of the story. But Jesus isn't talking to this crowd of people who live life like the younger brother. Jesus is responding to the grumbling of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. You see, Jesus continues the story. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house. And so he asked one of the servants what was going on. "Your brother is back," he was told, "and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return." And the older brother was very angry and wouldn't go in. The older brother cannot understand. He is furious. He is so mad that there's a celebration that the father killed and cooked the best food for the greatest celebration, the most important party that could happen. Maybe the older brother was hoping it would be for his wedding or for him as a celebration of maybe reaching a certain milestone. And then, here's what happens next. His father came out and begged him. But the older brother, he replied, "All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet, when this son of yours," not my brother, But this son of yours comes back. After squandering all your money on prostitutes, you celebrate by killing the fattened calf. And for all of us, I think we should maybe tap in for a second to understanding the attitude and logic of the older brother, because we love the ideas of mercy and forgiveness and grace. But I think all of us have a religious tendency in our heart that says the motto of religion: do good, get good. Do bad, get bad. Now, if you're here and you're like, no, I don't think that way, like, pause for a second. Have you never been in a situation where you see somebody who's getting all of the praise or the promotion or the whatever, and somehow, like, they haven't done any of the right things? It seems random for them, or it seems like they're being rewarded for their bad behavior. You feel like you've been working, you've been doing all the right things, you've been saying all the right words. You've been following the different directions that your boss gave you at work, and yet they're promoted. And you're left here still stuck in the same role that you've been in for years. Or that you've been doing all the right things when you're chasing a relationship, when you're trying to get married and find a spouse. You've been working so hard and doing all of the things that you feel like God said that you should do, and avoiding all the things that you feel like the church has told you should not do. And you find yourself in this position where your friends who's doing the exact opposite, seems like they're in a healthier, happier relationship, and now they're getting married, and you feel lost and alone and rejected. That you feel like you've been showing up to church, you've been praying, you've been connecting with God, and then that diagnosis came in. You didn't deserve it. And you're right. You didn't deserve it. I think all of us have this tendency to believe that if you do good, you should get good. If you do bad, you should get bad. And religion offers control through earning and deserving. And it can be offensive because it can tell you you've got to do this and this and this and not do that in order for God to be happy with you. But grace, which is where Jesus steps in and breaks down all of these walls of religiosity, grace is even more offensive because it says you can't do anything. It is out of your control, no matter what. Grace removes your control and removes logic from the equation and brings us into a story like this. And I heard this quote last week: grace is a liberating contradiction between what we deserve and what we get. It doesn't make sense. It's not merited or deserved, and it's why the older brother is so angry. The older brother believes that the younger brother deserves nothing and got everything. But I, older brother, I deserve everything and I got nothing. And Jesus, in his whole time on earth, and even to this day, wants to defy and shatter the walls and ideas that we build up as religion: do good, do bad, get bad, with this new, fresh, uncomfortable, maybe offensive, maybe painful idea of grace. And so, Jesus looks the self-righteous teachers of the law and Pharisees in the eye. And he says this: his father said to him, "Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day, for your brother was dead, and he has come back to life. He was lost, and now he is found." And I was sitting in my office in 2018, little square room, no windows, but kind of a nice desk, and I'm sitting there, and I don't remember why, but my job at the time was to do like IT and fix the church's computers. And I was, I don't know, in between work, or maybe I'd clocked out, and I'm sitting there at my desk and I'm working on an assignment for school. And the assignment is for the school that I went to when studying to become a pastor. And the assignment actually had us studying this very same parable. And I was angry. I was stressed. I felt alone and rejected. You see, I had been working now in church for 5 years. I'd moved across the country to work for a pastor who told me that if I came and worked for him, there would be this route for me to move out of the jobs that I'd been doing before in IT and into this role where I could do some pastoral work, maybe with youth, maybe in the main auditorium. And I desperately wanted, I felt like God had told me that it was going to be my moment to go and to lead a church. And so I'm sitting there. After 5 years of this, I'm looking around, and realizing I feel like the last pick. My friends, even friends who had started following Jesus after I started the job and then got a job at the same place, were getting the same things that I was asking for. People were, I was like, hey, boss, please, all I want is to get some practice in up on stage. I want to practice talking in front of people. Could I just have a spot to do the announcements? And in 8 years at the job, I was given the opportunity to do the announcements one time. And my friends were up there, and they were getting up there like every other week in front of people, and they were getting these opportunities, and they were getting promoted or brought into these other jobs, and I felt lost, alone, forgotten, resentful, angry. Felt overlooked, like there was not a bit of recognition coming my way. But I'm working on this passage, and I read this part of the verse we just read. His father said to him, "Look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours." Changed my life. I just started sobbing at work, in this office, my back to the door, hoping no one would notice. My story wasn't over. It was like God stepped in, said, "I see you." And I don't know if you noticed, but that was actually the end of the story, the verse that we read right before this slide. Jesus just stops. The older brother doesn't reply. The father says this in a couple other lines to the older brother: your brother was dead and now he's found, now he's alive, so come and celebrate. And he just looks the religious leaders in the eye. Because of all of the parables, most of the parables are like pretty self-contained, but I think this one he's waiting for the older brother to write the end of the story. I think at that moment he was looking at me, saying, you get to write the end of this story. Look out here. You're mad that people who came to follow Jesus after you were already working at this job are out here leading in the church. Your brother, your sister, they were dead. And now they're alive. So he looks me in the eye. And I think he looks you in the eye today too. And gives you an opportunity to decide how this story ends for your life. You see, in this story, Jesus redefines three things. Number one, he redefines sin. I think all of us, if you are going to use the word sin at all, the younger brother is like the caricature picture of like what sin is. You like blow up your family, you waste all the things God gave you, and then you come like home begging for a next chance. Like I think most of us feel comfortable saying, yeah, that's a bad way to live. And yet, I think Jesus wants to confront us with the idea that the older brother is just as much in sin, but he is distant from God. He is distant from God because of his goodness, because of the ways that he tried to obey. But at the same time, both of them don't want their father. They just want their father's stuff. So one of them is lost in his badness, and the other one is lost in what I think most of us would call good. There are two ways to live without God: breaking all of the rules or keeping them. Looking for the control you're looking for over your relationship with God. And let me just tell you, I can be tempted here. It is so easy for me to be like, okay, I'm going to pray the right prayers, I'm going to do the right things, and I'm going to show up on time, and Timberlake's going to be good, and my job's going to be good, and my career's going to go well, and my family's going to be good, and my relationship with my wife will get better, and my finances will get better, and I'm just doing all the right things. And then God's grace pours in on me, and I'm going to experience all of these good things because I controlled them and I did the right things. And how many of us here have this like just temptation, this desire, this or commitment even to just do the right things, because if we do good, we believe we'll get good. We do bad, we get bad. The second thing that Jesus redefines here is God. And I don't know if you know this. Jesus is the first person to refer to God as Father. Now, I mean that in an individual sense. In the Old Testament, there are times, a lot of times, that God is referred to as the father of this communal nation of Israel. He's the father of our nation, or he's the father of the Jewish religion. But the very first person who ever speaks about God as their personal father is Jesus. And then what he does is teach us to do the same. And I know for some of us it's so hard. It can feel patriarchal. It can feel like whatever your relationship was with your father can get in the way and color what it means for us to view and see and relate to God. But God wants to be your personal father. And what does the father do? Well, he doesn't wait for us. The moment he sees his younger son up on the hill, he chases after him. And he chases after the older son. He goes and finds him. The older son never goes and talks to the father. Father comes out and talks to him. And the third thing that Jesus redefines in this story is salvation. We know that if we're living really bad, or if we know people who are living in a really bad way, they're trapped in their depression or their hurt, or they're blowing up their lives, we want them to experience salvation where they are saved from that mess. But how many of us are willing to experience salvation from the things that we maybe feel like are good or right? How many of us have hard hearts where we don't want to hear that person? We don't want to experience what God's doing here. We don't want to know what the father's going to say if the father's going to treat the younger brother that way. So many of us, and I speak just from personal experience and from a lot of stories at Timberlake, so many of us let the good parts of our life, the parts that we get really polished and look really nice, keep us distant from God. Makes it hard for us to see our need from him. And when it sinks in that our goodness can be a way of avoiding God, oh, it's going to change you. Goodness kept the older son from joining God's party. We have a city full of lost sons and daughters chasing happiness in whatever way they can, and not knowing that they're not going to find it, not in any lasting way. Some of us may be in that same boat. Oh man, I want to be a church that welcomes our neighbors with open arms, no matter where they came from, no matter how bad it was. This week, I got a couple calls from people who let me know that we lost another young adult, took his own life. Just an 8-minute walk from here, just straight south. Man, I don't want to be a city that's known for that. I don't want to be a city where our reputation about the way that we handle mental health is the way that it is today. I don't want to be a church where we lose a single student to mental health, or adults for that matter. Man, God wants to break down the hardness in our hearts that we build when we try to be good enough or know enough things or correct people enough or live the right life, and make us a brokenhearted church that cannot wait for younger brother, younger sister, son or daughter to come home. Pastor and author out of New York, passed away a couple years ago, named Timothy Keller, wrote this book called The Prodigal God. I don't know if you've ever heard the word prodigal outside of a church context, but it means lavish and extreme and decadent. And man, I mean, that's true of the younger son, but who is the most lavish and extreme and decadent person in this story? It's God. God wants you to experience that. God wants our city to experience his lavish, extreme, and decadent love and generosity. And if you haven't experienced that, if you've never opened your heart up to the Father, I want to give you an opportunity to do that right now. I'm going to just pray a prayer. And if you want to open your heart up to God, all you need to do is pray that same prayer just silently in your own head as I pray with it. And then afterwards, we're going to stand and we're going to celebrate. We're going to practice this celebration as we sing about the goodness of God. If you want to begin following Jesus, if you want to open your heart up to the Father and experience his radical, excessive, decadent love, just pray in your own head as I pray. Jesus, we love you. Whether we have known you for a long time or we're just getting to know you today, we want you. Not just your stuff, not the inheritance, not the blessings. We want you. We want your love so close. We want to experience your presence and your peace. Lord, would you invite us to wear the ring, to wear the robe, to step into the confidence of the love that you have for us? Would you set us free from the ways that we lose our freedom to the things all around us? It's in your name we pray. Amen. Can I invite you to stand and sing with us as we sing about the goodness of God?